feel like it's connected to all the cells of the horse, and you can move your limb or take a breath or turn your shoulder ever so slightly, and it's just like a perfect connection with the horse because of something intrinsically rewarding. That was what I kind of learned how to start the process of with Misa in that first year. I wish I could gift everyone in the entire equestrian community an opportunity to feel the like joy that exudes off of a horse that totally owns their movement and is like rocking their dance next to you completely at liberty. Like, oh, the best feeling ever.
Welcome to the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast, a source for riding and training insights with the goal of helping your horse be a happy, light, and willing partner. I'm your host, Amalia Dempsey, a mainstream equestrian rider who discovered natural horsemanship, and now I help riders like you achieve connection and communication, so you can have more fun and fulfillment whilst prioritising partnership with your horse. Want to find out my horse training philosophy? Access the free Connection and Communication mini course at amaliadempsey.com. Now sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast. And in today's episode, we chat with Tara Davis, aka Unbridled Goddess. At her ranch in Humboldt County, California, Tara immerses herself in the teachings of the herd, sharing the timeless wisdom of the horse. Weaving together lessons from science and spirituality, hers is a unique horsemanship approach in which the main goal is to empower both the horse and the human. She believes that opening our awareness to the possibilities of a more conscious and consensual relationship with our horses will reflect on our interpersonal relationships as well as our relationships with ourselves. What I love about Tara is that she is so in tune with herself, is unapologetically authentic, and sees the world through a lens of love and kindness. I know you're going to love this episode. We talk about so much. We discuss Tara's start in traditional ways of training horses and competitive dressage, what she learnt from riding amongst a herd of beautiful friesians in the desert, the story behind Unbridled Goddess, from a $250 beautiful but traumatised mare, Misa, the beginning of her journey to working with horses in a way that gives the horse autonomy, balancing the use of negative and positive reinforcement, all the controversial questions as usual, the importance of horse and human emotions in training and in life, what's important for horses' happiness, who inspires her, what books and resources she recommends, and so much more. I know you're going to love this episode, so let's dive in. Welcome, Tara, to the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I'm super excited. Let's get stuck into the first question. So can you tell us about your horse journey to date, when you got into horses, how you got into horsemanship, and what has led to where you are today?
Oh gosh, that's a long and loaded history. But I started out before I could walk. Actually, I was one of those people who was lucky enough to be born into a horsey family. So my mom is a horsewoman and has been for her whole life. And so we grew up around horses, my whole family did. And I was lucky enough to be around them from a young age and kind of learn to ride alongside learning to walk, and just got to experience learning how to be a horsewoman throughout the course of my childhood, which I think shaped who I was. I got to start out in very traditional horsemanship, but kind of always had, the draw towards hopping on bareback and riding around and going off and adventuring in the hills, and always had that little wild streak, but really got focused in on dressage and competing in my teens. And I had a really incredible horse growing up who my family actually still has. He's the same age as me. We got him when I was 7, and we kind of grew up together. And he's now retired and living with my parents. So he's kind of like the horse I credit most of my really shaped who I was as a horsewoman. How it is when you get a young child, a young horse to grow together. We had lots of trials and tribulations, but I think that like getting to have a horse who I connected with emotionally on such a deep level and was able to kind of explore and experiment with was so it was so important to the person I kind of grew up to be. But yeah, the getting to do competitive dressage kind of changed me a little bit for a while. I'm really glad I got to experience it, and I'm really glad that I kind of dove really deep into that. But transitioning over from my childhood horse into kind of like my grown-up horse, I really wanted a warm blood, and I ended up with a beautiful Oldenburg who we had some really fantastic moments together, but also a lot of challenges. He was, looking back now with everything I know, I can recognize that he was really shut down and was very explosive because of how shut down he was. So it was this, he's 17.3 hands and I'm 5 foot tall. So it was this like, kind of battle of the wills all the time. And it didn't feel very good. So it was this like many years of feeling like something wasn't right and not being able, like not having the skills and not having the mentorship to be able to make a difference in our relationship. And I ended up retiring him at 14 because he was just like so explosive and, quote unquote dangerous. I had so many trainers tell me he was dangerous and should be put down and all this stuff. And it kind of broke my heart. Actually, it totally broke my heart. Getting to feeling like I let him down and like losing a friend. I found a really great retirement home for him. So he's living a happy life. But looking back now, I really, really wish I had the skills I have now to be able to help him. I feel like I could have gotten through to him, but he was kind of my wake up horse. But it wouldn't happen for a couple of years. I actually was so sad about the way we kind of had to end things that I actually kind of gave up on horsemanship for probably about 2 years before I found a really wonderful woman who let me work on her ranch. And she had this beautiful ranch with thousands of acres, and she had a herd of Friesians that they just were like wild and free, and she just let them be horses. And, she rode fitless, and it was the first time I'd ever been introduced to anything like that. And it was actually amazing. The first day that I worked with her, she put me up on her mare in the halter and turned the whole herd out onto like 1,000 acres and was like, go learn to be a part of the herd. Like, go see what their, behaviors and interactions are like. And it was just magical. Like, I'm all wide-eyed and completely blown away and kind of terrified, but also I don't want to, like to show this woman that I'm afraid. So I'm like, okay, sure, bareback and a halter. I'm just going to go like follow this herd as they trot off into the like high desert. And it was the most beautiful, quiet, powerful afternoon of my life. And like, I just cherish that memory so much. And that was like the first time I'd ever really seen a herd that was interacting and living and supporting each other as a unit. So, she was getting to see what was possible after kind of coming from the opposite end of the spectrum of like being in the competitive barn with horses and stalls and having the experience that I did with Oliver, my Oldenburg, and kind of losing him and just getting to see like, wow, this is how it should be,
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty spectacular.
In that herd full of Friesians in the middle of the desert, just soaking that up. What did you learn from the herd?
Well, one of the things that was really interesting was having that much space and inhabiting that much space with the horses, and all of the kind of skills that I had in my previous work as in general, like working with horses, your horses couldn't really escape from you, So like, it didn't really matter how bad you were to them. There was no real option for them. I mean, they could act up under saddle and you might have to walk them in a chain and they might be hard to catch even in their stall, and not all of them were like that, of course, but like they didn't have an option to not participate really. And these horses, if they didn't like how you worked with them the time before, they're like, I'm not coming anywhere near you. I have acres and acres and acres to put in between myself and I. Do you want to go get an ATV and chase me, or do you want to be nice to me? And the really interesting thing was the pace that ranch was at was just, it was on horse time. There was no pressure to get anything done. There was no, we have to prepare for the, it's really all about like healing the horses and allowing them to be whole. And if anything happened above that, that was all fine and dandy, but it was just it was a bonus on top of the well-being of the horse really coming first, which was very novel to me.
Wow. And so how can a ranch run like that? Like, what was the purpose of it? Was it just for breeding, or did they do competition? How can a ranch sort of, it feels funny saying ranch, I would say ranch.
A ranch.
Ranch.
Ranch today.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sort of picturing this beautiful ranch with these lovely horses, and everyone's able to connect with them and they have a very natural lifestyle. But I'm sure that there was an underlying purpose, perhaps.
That was actually one of the most interesting things, is there really wasn't, which was also the first time I'd ever encountered that. It was really a passion ranch. But no, this woman, she had it was a rescue, so she did take in horses. So she had one horse who had EPM, a Friesian who had EPM. She focused mainly on Friesians, but she did have a couple other breeds in there. So she did some rehabilitation on horses who were kind of like, either their owners didn't necessarily have the capability, or they just felt like their horses wouldn't necessarily be able to show anymore, so they came to this ranch. And then she did also have a couple like mares that she would occasionally breed, and you know, it was this like, it was a passion of hers. Friesians were a passion of hers. So she had these horses that she wasn't like trying to breed to make money or anything like that, but she did have some really incredible bloodlines that she was perpetuating. And then she also occasionally did like therapy work. So she did some work with veterans and equine therapy. So it was this really amazing time experiencing a horse ranch or a facility that wasn't just all about like pumping out horses who were like really good at something. It was like, these horses are whole, we're getting them to full health. And then if they want to participate in healing sessions, they can, but they also don't have to.
I love that. So, sounds amazing. So what happened next from experiencing what you did with the Friesians at that ranch to then where you are now? Like, what sort of bridged that gap?
Well, I actually took another year or two off after being at that ranch. Mostly like I couldn't really bring myself to get another horse and get myself back into the horse world that I knew. And I just really didn't have any idea of a way to find a place that was anything like that. How was I going to give my horse what those horses had? All I knew was, you know, maybe if you were lucky, it was a stall with a run and you got turned out for a couple hours a day. And I didn't really know how to find anything other than that. And I didn't feel like I could provide the kind of life that I wanted to for my horses. So I just didn't really do that anymore. And that was really hard. I sometimes I look back and I'm like, what did I do? What did I do in all that time? Like, I just didn't have horses. What is that?
What does that look like?
A lot of free time, I guess.
Yeah, I had a lot of money as well.
Probably. No, I quickly saved all that up and then spent it on the next piece. No, but then amazingly, actually, I got back into horses after I started dating my now fiance, who was really into horses, which is kind of rare, especially in, I live in like very rural Northern California. And so it's kind of rare to meet someone like that who is also, you know, kind of like-minded, like is interested in alternative lifestyles. And he was really into horsemanship. And so when we started dating seriously, he was like, let's just get horses. And so of course, you know, I knew he was the one immediately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can kind of credit him for getting me back into it. And I always joke, I'm like, this is your fault. You know, I'm out with the horses all day long. This is you. You did this.
Yeah, you can just blame him.
Yeah. But then, I kind of slowly got back into horses, and then was looking into getting a horse as a pack animal to bring up into the mountains. And I was looking for like kind of like project horses. Like I wasn't looking to spend a lot of money on a horse. So I stumbled across this stunningly gorgeous Andalusian mare for $250.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, red flag number one is that an
Mhm.
Andalusian mare is this much money. And I'm looking at the like the description, and it's basically like, yeah, she's ready for a rider. Just like, you know, she's a certain type of person, but she's like pretty much ready to go. And I immediately got in the car and I drove 18 hours to go see her because I was so drawn to her. And when I arrived, it was evening, and she was in a round pen, and there was like a big floodlight behind her, around her, but she was just galloping around the round pen, like in a pure panic, with like this dust flying up everywhere in the floodlight. So all you could see is like her outline, like a silhouette of her just like flying around this round pen, like just a million miles an hour. And I had picked my mom up on the way down to drive there because she's like my horsewoman mentor. And I looked at her and I was like, oh God, I love her already. So, of course, with all the red flags and you know, the first moment of seeing her, when I did meet her in daylight, finally, I was like, this is a horse who has a lot of trauma. But I could not leave her, so I ended up forking over $250 for her and bringing her home. And that's Misa. So if you've followed my page, you may have seen her on there. She's my inspiration for everything. And she is the unbridled goddess. I have to like always clarify that with people. Like, she's my unbridled goddess. It's not me. But yeah, she was really, really, really traumatized from a very, very, I would classify it as extremely abusive place where she had come from. Well, to start with, every time they haltered her or needed to halter her, they would rope her feet. So they would rope a leg and then they would hobble her. And that was the only way that you could get a halter on her. And then that was how they did everything. They hobbled her or they put her in stocks to do anything to her. And they round penned the absolute shit out of her. So she really only had two modes: galloping around you or like staring at you, but leaning backwards and like shaking and shivering, because she knew she was, you know, quote unquote, supposed to give you her eyes and all this stuff. But yeah, so if you didn't have a rope and you didn't know how to throw a rope and catch her hoof, then you really couldn't catch her at all. And when I brought her home, I made a promise to her. I said, I'm never, ever, ever going to do that to you, no matter what. I will never, ever do that to you again. I will never, never hobble you. I will never take away your autonomy. And so that was kind of the beginning of this journey, was like, I brought her home and turned her out in a 2.5 acre pasture, which 2.5 acres on a horse that absolutely has no desire to be anywhere close to you is a lot of room.
Yes. Wow.
So that was kind of the start of like just approaching horsemanship in a different way. I had seen what she had been through. I had heard what she'd been through. And then of course, later on, I found out even more of what she had been through. And I just decided that I just wasn't going to put her through anything like that. It had to be on her terms, and I would stick with it for as long as it took.
Wow. How long did it take in that 2.5 acre paddock before you could actually get close to her?
It took about a month for her to want to even like be near me. I think we had our first touch after about a month. Mm-hmm. And it took another month after that for her to be okay with any sort of like rope being attached to me. So we could start working on haltering. Yeah. And the amazing thing was, like, during those 2 months, I really focused on encouraging, or kind of, I try to think of it as like explaining through my actions that I was never going to put her, I was never going to put my needs ahead of her needs, and that there was no agenda. And so she kind of learned that over the course of that 2 months, and I was able to actually introduce her to positive reinforcement over the course of those months. And that was a really big turning point in being able for her to understand that, like, A, I was never going to force her to do anything, and B, there was kind of a nice incentive to being around me. She started to make strides pretty quickly after that. So after the first 2 months, we were able to halter and lead and like go other places. And once we could go other places, we just started walking, and we would just go walk and explore. And we went we're really lucky. We live just a couple blocks from like thousands of acres of redwood forest. So
amazing.
We would just hop out there and just like walk for ages and just explore everything. And she just slowly started to understand that like we would go places together and she was the leader. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It was a really amazing process.
Do you feel like there is still some trauma in there, or?
Definitely. Yeah, I've had her now for 5 years, I think.
Okay.
And she experienced like systematic abuse. It wasn't a super long time. She was actually a little bit of backstory. She was feral on a ranch that ended up getting all the animals seized off of it for hoarding. So they were like underfed, they kind of had just like not fed these horses, and it was all these horses out and just like stallions in with mares and mares in with their dads and all this sort of stuff. So it was kind of it was a mess. So she was kind of untouched, and then she was brought in by animal control. She was seized, and they were going to put her down because her and pretty much they would just go into like a blind panic because it's not clear. I don't know much about her history there, but if they had had bad handling there, or if they just had never been handled and they were put into this dangerous situation, there were like horses running through panels and running over people and all this stuff. It was a kind of a mess. And so they were going to put all of them down because they were deemed, a danger to humans. So they kind of put out this little notice that said, if you can come with a trailer and get any horse on this trailer, like they're yours. And the person who went and got her got 2 other horses too. And I think that person didn't think they were doing a bad thing. They thought that they were giving these horses like a new lease on life, but the methods of, handling these horses were just atrocious. I mean, to me, even back before I had really like had this whole revolution of my methods, it was like, wow, you did what to this horse? Like, oh, you hobbled her, put a pack saddle on her, strapped 200 pounds of salt, and then round penned her for an hour. Like, holy shit, that's insane. Like any horse, especially a horse like her, who's so sensitive and she's so, I don't know if you've ever had any experience with Andalusians, but they just have this, they're amazing. Yeah. The brio and the they're kind of like an unbreakable horse. Like if there's any breed of horse that isn't able to be broken, it's an Andalusian. And to put a horse like that into a situation where that's how they're being handled is just, it's like, obviously with any horse, it's horrible, but there are some horses that get put in a situation like that and they submit and they shut down and they become helpless. Mm-hmm. And that's heartbreaking. But then there's also horses who have the opposite, where you do that to them and they will never stop fighting you. And that was how she was. She was just unbreakable. Mm-hmm. And that's why they sold her. They were like, we put her in this program for 6 months and she just every day being handled like this, and she's just not changing.
But yet they advertised her as ready for a rider.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm like, you want to get on that horse? Like you would die. Like she would just, the level, I've never seen a horse that goes, until I had met her and seen her in that environment, I had never seen the type of, when people say blind panic, but they don't see anything. They're so frantic and they're so scared. And of course now, when I look at like helicopter roundups, like that type of, you see horses like climbing over panels there and that kind of thing. That's the type of blind panic that I saw in her. And it was just so heart-wrenching to see that. And so of course that sort of trauma, and if you see her now, you would almost not be able to like recognize the type of horse she is. She like comes up to you, even strangers, she comes up, she like rub her body on you, turn around and be like, scratch my butt. She loves people, and she's like friendly, and she loves giving kisses too. So like come up and give you a kiss on the cheek, and
beautiful.
Just like so sweet. But she definitely has triggers still that I am open to, like just being accepting of them for as long as they need to. And I think on a healing journey like hers, it might be 5 more years or 10 more years, or it might never go away, and that's okay.
What are those triggers?
Well, it depends. She's very much trigger stacking for her is a huge thing, but any sort of mostly it's like, if you have that intention in your heart of like, I'm going to come in here and do something to you, like I need to get something done. It can range anywhere from a smile to her being like, I'm just not going to engage with you that much, to if you go in there like that, or if you're in like a really bad place, or if someone else had to go in there and catch her in like a traditional way of like, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to put a halter on her, she would just hightail it out of there. And it's not really that extreme looking now to me. When I see it, I'm like, okay, I can see that she is fully in a flight state, and I can see that her like trauma response has been triggered. But like a lot of people would just be like, oh, she's just, trotting off, and she'll turn around and look at you and they think like, oh, look, there she is. She's like giving you her eyes, and but to me, I see that and I'm like, I see that as her old patterns of behavior where she's like, she is fleeing, but then she's trying to preserve herself at the same time. And this is like for her and I, it's a very rare occasion. And a lot of times, she's kind of my like, she's like my touchstone emotionally. So if I go in there and there's even a hint of that kind of like body language in her, even if she does come up to me, if there's that hint of like hesitation, I'm like, okay, I need to come in and check in with my body and see what I'm feeling. And then usually as soon as I become present in myself, it's like I can identify what it was in my body that was kind of giving her that signal that there was some sort of like untoward intention there, or even like an incongruence. Like if I'm not addressing something in my life and I go in there and want to connect with her, there's like that just ever so subtle wall that goes up where she doesn't want to fully engage. Whereas, and it's very obvious with her, because when she engages with you, it's like her whole heart just spills out and is like beautiful.
That's so nice. Wow. So how about we move on to your personal training approach or philosophy with horses? You've sort of touched on it, but can you tell us a little bit more about what it is you do now with horses? How would you describe your training approach?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Misa was kind of the like starting horse for me. She was really the one that I had to completely change everything that I did. Even though I kind of thought of myself as like coming from a natural horsemanship approach and all this sort of stuff. And I had to go even further to breaking down into, I needed to explore territories that I was not aware of, even existed or were possible in the equine realm. And since then, I've, expanded my herd of rescue dementia horses. I've now started working with other horses over the last, actually it's been like 2.5 years. I was about to say this past year, but time has flown. Like the last 2.5 years, I now work training other people's horses as well. And I've gone through a lot of changes over the last 5 years even. When I started with Misa, it's really interesting because I didn't go into it with any sort of like, I'm going to try positive reinforcement with her, I'm going to try force free with her, anything like that. I steered clear of kind of funny. I actually purposely decided not to like read any books or try to like follow any methodology, because that's my personality of like, I want to research everything and like understand how to do it. And what I decided with Misa, which is so counter to like everything I've ever done in my life before, was I said, you set the stage for everything. You tell me what works and what doesn't work, and you tell me how to go through this. And the purity of doing that with a horse that is so unapologetically bothered by humans was really powerful. And the interesting thing was like, I kind of went through like a full year with her of like developing this and just really exploring the kind of place where more like ethical horsemanship and emotional horsemanship meets. So I don't even really know how to like say exactly what it is I do, but I discovered with Misa that one of the keys to helping her heal has been through movement. And movement as their expression of emotion and expression of connection with the other person that you're dancing with or horse that you're dancing with. That was kind of like where we really went deep, was just going, what does it feel like to drop every expectation of like we're doing dressage, or we're doing, Western riding, or we're doing jumping or anything like that, drop all of that, to even drop teaching tricks, or drop all of it and just move with the horse and connect into and like sink into that feeling of when all of your cells feel like it's connected to all the cells of the horse, and you can move your limb or take a breath or turn your shoulder ever so slightly, and it's just like a perfect connection with the horse because of something intrinsically rewarding. That was what I kind of learned how to start the process of with Misa in that first year. And then getting to kind of crawl out of my little hole in the woods where I had, hung out with Misa and just learned from her for the whole year, and really kind of stayed away from kind of getting too much into my head, because I can kind of get very much into like, I'm going to just think my way through this, and learning how to release that and tap into that emotional, intuitive side of things was really like, that was the first step that I had to take and go really deep on. And then from there, I was able to kind of come back to my love, which is like figuring out scientific ways and studies that can support all of that sort of stuff. And I dove really deep into positive reinforcement, and kind of marrying that with classical dressage, and then molding all of that together with what I had discovered with Misa, which is figuring out a way to connect with the horse in a way that's intrinsically rewarding, and to learn how to move with them in a way that's kind of unbridled, I guess. Like
not, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's been a whole transition too, or transformation of, I think I became really afraid of pushing horses, because of kind of my guilt and shame about everything that I had done prior. I mean, so many things that I have so much shame about. And I was so afraid of bringing that into my work with Misa that I think with her, it was really necessary for me to like not push at all, like to let her lead completely. And then the interesting thing is, I'm okay with taking the lead sometimes, not in a way that's like, I'm going to tell you what to do all the time, but to be able to be like a dance partner where you're not just following all the time and being passive, but to be like engaged in participating and not just passively following. So it's been a really interesting, it's been a really interesting road in terms of like developing my style of horsemanship and what I do. And I think having so many different personalities of horses to work with, and being really blessed with having people trust their horses with me and trust the process, it's been really incredible to kind of find my footing and find a way to like help horses become even more full of themselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's interesting you mentioned the dance partner, because I did a father-daughter dance for my wedding with my dad, and it was all choreographed, and we had a lot of dance lessons and with a professional. And no offense, Dad, but sometimes he was a bit clumsy and it felt awkward and at times when we were learning. And then when I would dance with the teacher who was helping us, even though he was a little firmer, it felt good. And I felt good because I was like, wow, I can dance. Even though I couldn't, he was just leading me. He made me feel good dancing. So I'd imagine it would feel the same for a horse with someone who's, a leader, not in the boss kind of way, like I'll, do what I say, but in a guiding kind of manner, in a positive guidance. Yeah. So that's cool. And you mentioned that you didn't really follow kind of a system or a method with Misa, but could you tell us, I'm sure that you've had some mentors in the past or some methods or something you followed and learned from. Can you tell us about what has helped you along the way?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of complicated. I've for a long time, I've kind of just done things very much like on my own, and really learning about positive reinforcement, I think, has been a huge part of why I've been able to get really comfortable in this kind of mode of working with horses, because I spent the first 20 something years of my life getting really comfortable with using negative reinforcement to the detriment of the horse in a lot of ways, but also you become really skilled in applying and releasing and all the, it's whatever mode of horsemanship you're in. I think there is something to be said about becoming really, really, really skilled in. So to me, just getting really comfortable with applying positive reinforcement and like the whole, just educating myself on how to be successful and fair and clear with my horse in this new kind of way of communicating. That was really big. I really, honestly, I just say that the horses are my biggest teacher. And I find that I'm really lucky in that I have a lot of horses at my kind of fingertips. Like I personally, I think I have 7 of my own. And then I have a couple that are projects. And then I have rotating anywhere from 2 to 5 training horses at a time. And so just getting to, over the past couple of years, like truly being open to learning from the horse, like learning how to read the horse's body language, and not through the old lens of reading horse's body language, but becoming more educated on the psychology of horses and understanding what they're trying to say, and then developing a way to kind of give them a voice so that they can literally tell me things, has been really the biggest learning tool that I've had, I think. And that's part of why I've kind of tried to stay not away from like methodologies or anything. I do love learning about all that sort of stuff, but really letting the horse be the guide has been something I've found to be really important for me. But I do have just like lots of people who inspire me and who I think I, of course, pull from all the different teachers that I've had. I desperately wish there was more like positive reinforcement based teachers, because I think I'm lucky enough to find a lot of teachers who are willing to let me work with them through the kind of lens of not that I only use positive reinforcement, but when you come to like a trainer or a teacher or a mentor and you say, I want to use positive reinforcement kind of a lot, they think of you as like, oh, she only does like clicker training, or she only does positive reinforcement.
Or they don't know what positive reinforcement is, and they go, oh yeah, I use positive reinforcement as in praise. And it's like, actually, it's just more than that.
Totally. Or my favorite, which is one of my mentors, Arne Kutz, who's in Germany. I remember him being like, I don't use positive reinforcement. And then I went and I trained with him, and I was like, you totally use positive reinforcement. He's like, so we'll have to have a conversation about this later. But I've been really lucky to have people who are willing to kind of tweak their ways of working to kind of to kind of placate how I am as like a crazy horse girl.
So in what way do you use negative reinforcement now?
I try to keep it really minimal, but I am, once the horse has autonomy, like once they've been through my program long enough to know that they can say no, there is no punishment for saying no, and then we will find an alternative. Like if they say no, I don't just keep asking and keep asking and keep asking. Like to me, that's not an authentic yes. If you just keep asking until you get a yes. So like my horses all kind of have this understanding of if they don't want to do something, they just don't do it. And a lot of times they want to do something else because they don't want to end the session. So we also have start and stop signals for our sessions. Mm-hmm. So being able to say, I don't want to do this one thing, or I don't like how you're doing this one thing, but we're going to do something else. And then I follow that. And so once they kind of have that basis, then I do start to feel a little bit more comfortable in like, okay, can I ask for something with like my body pressure and that sort of thing, where if the horse is ready for it, if they're comfortable with it, if they feel like they have the ability to say no if they need to, I'll start incorporating use of more body pressure. Or if the horse doesn't have any negative connotations with like a lunge whip or a stick, sometimes I'll use that as like, we'll kind of switch back and forth between like using it as a target or like learning how to target towards it or move away from it. But I only really do that if they haven't had a negative experience with the whip, because so many of the horses that do come to me are very, very stressed by the presence of a whip. So that's kind of more rare. But I do try
them with the whip, or do you, if they've had a negative experience, do you just leave that out completely?
Usually I start with just leaving it out completely, and then I'll start to reincorporate it sometimes, using like counter conditioning. And I use targets a lot in my training. So a lot of times I'll teach even like the horses who have had no negative connotations with the whip, if they have never experienced, being hit with a whip or having anything escalating, then I'll start using it as a target. And so that
that's clever.
Horses for other people, or I'm working with horses for people who want to sell them or something like that. And so I want the horse to be able to understand how to speak like human talk in the regular world. And I don't want them to be like only, obviously I would love it if a home that I find for my horses would incorporate positive reinforcement. But the reality of the horse world is that like 90% of the people who are looking for a horse or can offer a horse a home are hoping to be able to have some sort of language that they can already speak with the horse. So being able to kind of transition my cues over, like starting them with positive reinforcement and then transitioning over to tactile cues, and then being able to use non-escalating negative reinforcement. That's obviously the caveat to all of the negative reinforcement I use, is that it's not escalating, it's non-escalating negative reinforcement, and it's only used when the horse is like really ready for it. But I'm not like opposed to it. And the more advanced the horses get, the more robust I feel like they are emotionally, then we can engage in it a little more. But then there are some horses like Misa who just like shuts down the moment you put pressure on her. Everything has to be an open invitation, it has to be an open hand, where I kind of feel like with her, it's like you have to create a vacuum. And so it's her learning to like fill up that space and not the other way around. You can't push against her and you can literally touch her and have her move over, of course, but like the negative reinforcement that I use with her is so minimal because it can so quickly lead to her being triggered.
Yes. And it's interesting you mention that, because I feel like a lot of people think that even a light pressure isn't negative reinforcement, but it is, right? Even just the lightest amount of pressure is still pressure at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Earlier, you were talking about the shame that you feel around things that you've done with horses in the past. Can you tell us what is something you once did with horses that you now no longer do? And what are some of the biggest mistakes you see other people making with horses?
Sure. I think the biggest mistake I've made with horses in the past has been not making space for emotions in the work that we've done. So however that looks, whether that's me completely overlooking their emotional state or their emotional needs, or whether it's me overlooking my own emotional needs and emotional state, to me, that's kind of the root of all of the stuff, all of the awful shit that I did as, a horse, rooted in that, like either not acknowledging what my horse was ready for, or not incorporating a true understanding of how they were feeling into training. Because I think if you have a good understanding of how your horse truly feels on the inside, and you allow that to change how you train, there's almost like, if you follow the horse's emotions, you are not going to, all of the like unethical stuff that we see, it wouldn't exist if you like truly follow that. And of course that's so hard to do in this world, like where, society itself, it really raises us to kind of ignore our emotional needs. So it's a constant learning, journey. And I think I'm definitely still on that now, but that's definitely a huge root of, there's specific instances of like where you're just using, to me, unethical means. Like I used to go through a pair of gloves a week in my dressage training, where like they would just wear holes through my ring finger because the contact was so strong. And like I think about that now, and I think about how like the horses that I train now have never experienced that in my hands. And like, I'm so grateful to be able to say that. And I'm honestly grateful for the shame that I carry, because it's made me who I am today, because I can now look back and remember what I've done. And it keeps me so much more like honest and aware of what I'm doing, because I'm so deeply don't want to become what I used to. And then let's see, what was the second part of that question was
the mistakes that you see other people making.
I think that too applies to a lot of people. You know, we as a people, as humans, as a race in this world as it stands today, like we're so dismissive of emotions and emotional needs. And I think like one of my biggest pet peeves is the saying, like, check your emotions at the gate, or like check your emotions at the barn door. You never bring that in. And I think that it's such a sad thing that people are missing out on the opportunity for processing their emotions alongside horses. I think they're like the most incredible. I work with this really wonderful woman called Lillian Hadar on a project called The Invisible Ride. And she found my Instagram and we talked about this project. It's called The Invisible Ride. And she explained to me, like, this is the ride that horses take us on. And like the second she said that, everything just clicked into place of like the idea that you can walk into a barn and the horses are not only willing to carry us physically, like the fact that horses are willing to carry us on their backs and put up with everything that we do to them in our journey to become better horsewomen and horsemen. They're not only willing to do that, but they are willing to take our emotions and like carry us. They're willing to do that for us. And I think not taking that invitation is such a shame, because it can lead to such a deep and meaningful and beautiful relationship filled with so much healing with our horses. And so when we talk about like leaving our emotions behind, or kind of like not being the master of our emotions, we really are short selling ourselves in this experience of being around horses when they're so willing to help us through learning how to become emotionally intelligent beings again. So, you know, I think it's easy to frame that as a mistake, but it's also something that we learn through society, and we learn through being hurt. So I think it's almost more like a wound. And I really, really, really hope that we as the equestrian community is open to healing that wound. And I think that it's also a beautiful opportunity to heal a wound that has kind of plagued our world and society in the past, I don't know how many 100 years, but I'm sure at some point there are some communities that are really beautifully in touch with their emotions. But I really think that that's one of the things that I lament the most when I look out on horsemanship.
It's so interesting. And you do hear that a lot. People say, don't take your emotions to horses, leave them at the gate. But I find myself, well, I suppose we're always having an emotional experience. So whenever I've had a day where I've had a big day, I'm feeling a bit frazzled, I'll just tell my horses, I'm like, guys, I've had a really big day today, forgive me, before I even start. I can't leave that behind. You carry it with you.
No, and I think I love that so much, because I tell my students all the time, like, you should verbalize, tell your horse what you're feeling. Like if you're frustrated with them, or you're scared, or you're feeling like, all these bad emotions that like we're not supposed to have as equestrians, of like, you show up and if you take your horse, you go into their living situation and you say, look, I just had the worst day at work and I'm really tired and I really want to have a really good ride right now. So right now to do something that's going to make me feel better. You're going to have so much of a better time with your horse, and it's not even about like whether your horse understands you or not, which that's a whole other question. It's you becoming in touch with what you are feeling on the inside and bringing that from something that's like bubbling way down in your tummy that you are not addressing and bringing it up to your conscious awareness is just like, even just doing that. If you don't do anything else, if you don't work on taking deeper breaths, if you don't work on grounding yourself, if all you do is verbalize the thing that you're feeling in that moment, like you're going to have a better time.
Yeah. And at an absolute minimum, you're just going to feel better by just releasing that. So
yeah, totally.
It's such a good practice. Speaking of emotional needs of horses and humans, what do you think makes a happy horse?
Well, I think that the very basis of it, they should have freedom, friends, forage, and safety, being able to feel safe. And I really think like that is something that's so underrated in our equestrian community, is like the horses should have access to food all the time, or not all necessarily all the time, but minimum of 18 hours a day. They should have access to some sort of food that they're able to chew and process through their system. That's like bare minimum step number one. Ideally, they have enough room to move around and, express themselves and travel around and have friends. They should be able to have contact. And, I have started to, at the beginning of my kind of journey into bringing horses into my ranch and setting up a truly rewarding living situation for them. I was like, they all have to be out together all the time. And I now have 5 horses who are with me that need to have set amounts of time where they are not in with other horses at the same time because of dietary needs. So they need to be able to have like time to eat on their own and so on and so forth. And juggling like horses' needs like that, the individual needs of a horse, and being a boarding and training facility and having other horses. So it's like, I've had to figure out how to develop a system where they still have access to social contact, because I think that's so important, especially like right now I have 2 stallions at my property, and for them to be able to have 24/7 access to social contact where they can groom each other and also still have time where they can be separate from other horses and be able to meet their dietary or medical restrictions. It's been, a whole process, but learning how to do that and experimenting around with that and seeing it's so worth it, and being able to gift that to them. But yeah, those are like kind of the non-negotiables to me for a happy horse. And then beyond that too, when you can train them with autonomy and being able to give them freedom of choice and freedom of participation, like I wish it's the icing on the cake, but also to me, it's like, it's kind of slowly becoming my next non-negotiable of like, I wish I could gift everyone in the entire equestrian community an opportunity to feel the like joy that exudes off of a horse that totally owns their movement and is like rocking their dance next to you completely at liberty. Like, oh, the best feeling ever. And like, you're literally just high on joy because you can feel them just like they're at their peak experience too. And it's so, you can't necessarily have that without having all the rest of it. Like, they have to be happy in themselves in their other, 23 and a half hours a day, so that then when they come in and have that experience, it's just heightened that much more.
Yes, absolutely. At a baseline, your horse has to be happy in its everyday life before you can, I guess, expect them to enjoy your sessions with you. So
yeah,
that's a lot of people have mentioned that on the podcast. So what do you think is your favorite thing to do with horses?
I mean, if I'm being selfish, it's totally riding at liberty, because that's just like such an amazing feeling. But I also I honor that not every horse is open to being ridden. So the next greatest thing is, of course, just like experiencing that same joy and movement and joy and like autonomy and movement on the ground beside them. Both of those are my favorite.
Yes, love that. And moving on to, I always ask controversial questions. Can you tell us your thoughts on the bits versus fitless debate?
Ooh. This is actually a really interesting one for me, because I am, for a really long time, I've been like stark bitless only, like 100%, no question about it. And my horses are all trained bitless. Now, the interesting thing has been in transitioning over into teaching more horses that are not mine, that I don't have full control over how they, like the only time I'll use that word, control over how I what I decide to use with them. I actually made the decision. It was really hard for me to make the decision to be willing to work with students who chose to wear bits. Because, and I'm white in what I expect of people in the same way that I wouldn't expect a horse to just understand what I'm talking about at liberty. And so learning to meet the people where they are and not just meeting the horses where they are has been a part of the process. And through that, it's been really interesting as I've kind of also separate to my learning journey in like liberty and kind of more autonomous based training. I also still do train with like or very traditional trainers. Like I have my mentor in Europe, Arna, and like when I went and rode with him, all of his horses are incredibly highly trained and they ride on the curb. And so it was this really interesting process for me. Like I had this immense guilt going and riding these horses and these like big curved bits, but also it started me on this learning journey of like, if you're going to use a bit, it should be the appropriate bit for your horse. And that doesn't just mean like a fat loose ring snaffle for everybody. That means like you should have somebody who is very educated in bits come in, analyze the anatomy of your horse's mouth and find a bit that's suitable for you, that doesn't pinch, that doesn't have, angles or places where it causes unnecessary pressure points, and so on and so forth. So it's definitely as a personal choice, I prefer bitless. I do think that there are ways that we can ethically, it's always based on the idea of the horse having autonomy. Can the horse choose not to participate in this? To me, that's like the baseline of it. But you can consciously, I think is a better word, use a bit if you are willing to become a skilled enough rider for it. Like you need to be able to know how to use the bit in an appropriate manner and to be able to not inappropriately use it, because that's the other thing. And this is where that like mastering your emotions, you don't need to become the master of your emotions. You need to become so in touch with your emotions that you don't allow yourself to be subconsciously ruled by them, so that you aren't taking out your frustration or, using, I think I'm always going to come back to that autonomy. Like you should never be forcing your horse into a shape, whether it's a bitless bridle or a bitted bridle. It doesn't matter if you have 20 pounds of pressure on each rein on a side pole to force your horse into frame, and you're digging into that horse's side with your inside leg, that's not any better to me. I mean, yes, you may be causing less pain potentially, but you are still putting that horse in a position where they do not have autonomy and they're not. The concepts of self-carriage really comes into play. And if you go back and you're studying the masters of horsemanship, they all have such strict requirements on how to train a horse. And there's a reason for that, because there's so many quick and dirty ways to do it, especially when you do have a bit, or if you're willing to use bitless options that are a little bit more severe. There's so many quick and dirty ways to get your horse to like comply with what you want and to look, quote, to look like you want it to look. Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily so much about bit versus bitless, but rather about like how deep you're willing to go into analyzing your own horsemanship and what you want and how you're willing to get that. And also how educated you are on all of that stuff. Because I know, like for me personally, even I didn't know much about bits and I used them for a really long time. I didn't understand the importance of like finding a mouthpiece that was really appropriate for your horse's mouth and all that sort of stuff. And I do think that's also on the other side of the coin. It's also important to find bitless bridles that are appropriate for your horse, and being willing to listen to them if they're expressing discomfort and all that sort of stuff, because not every bitless bridle is necessarily the right fit for your horse as well. But yeah, long answer, kind of rambling, but it's complicated.
That's good. And I think, we've had saddle fitters for a while. Everyone's familiar with having a saddle that is suitable for your horse, but now bit fitters are becoming more of a thing, which I think is good because every horse's mouth has a slightly different anatomy. So that's good. And going back to what you were saying before about even when you used to have gloves and wear them out every week and having the tight reins to ultimately get self-carriage, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Only lightness will create lightness.
It doesn't make sense. But anyway, speaking of that side of things, which I guess is more apparent in competitive worlds, do you have any ambitions to compete? Did you used to compete? And why or why not?
Yeah. This is actually a whole nother revolution that I'm like kind of going through personally right now as well. I did compete a lot. I do compete. I haven't competed obviously in the last year because it's been kind of the whole world's gone crazy. But no, I was competing in working equitation. And one of the reasons why I chose that is because you're allowed to use whatever tack you want. So that means that you can ride in a dressage saddle and still have a bitless bridle, or you can, the whole spectrum. And I love the rule book actually because I think it really is honoring the horse. So like you can't have cruel tack, in the way that there are many places within the horse world competitively where I don't think the tack regulations are near strict enough because they allow some seriously awful and torture machines to be placed on the horses' bodies. But yeah, I enjoy working equitation because it kind of gives me that freedom. I am planning on competing this year as well. I have a couple of competitions lined up with one of my young horses. And I think that I actually really enjoy it because I love putting myself in really difficult situations because I'm really competitive. And to me, that's like a beautiful place for me to grow because I'm so competitive. It's a great opportunity for me to force myself to be an advocate for the horse. So like if the horse isn't having a good time, like my competitive side goes, doesn't matter. Like you can just, use a little extra this and a little extra that and like get the job done. And so it's a total test for me. And I've actually kind of changed even the language about how I talk about competition, and I try to use the word exhibition. To me, that changes the psychology of it a little bit and just like the meaning behind the word. I'm not competing with my horse. I'm exhibiting the work that we've done together.
It's a display, yeah.
Yeah, it's a display, exactly. And so I think that when I put it like that, in my mind, I go, it's important for me to show that there is something outside of the realm of like normal horsemanship. And I think the other thing too is that a lot of the arguments that I come across against the kind of style of training that I do is like, oh, well, that's cool. Like you can do, whatever tricks, but like you can't do anything practical. You can't go do anything really real with your horse. And I'm like, actually, no, I totally can. So it's kind of, to me, been like this great opportunity to exhibit and display the abilities of this kind of horsemanship. Like the horse that I'm actually going to be competing this year, I started him as, well, when I bought him, they told me he was 4, but it turns out he was 3. So I started him a little younger than I would have, but luckily I started really slowly, but started him as a 3-year-old starting with positive reinforcement. And that's for his entire career. He has only, non-escalating negative reinforcement that is transitioned from tactile cues that was taught by positive reinforcement. And all of when I love to be able to kind of point to him and go, look, it is possible. And he's not an easy horse. And so I do like the idea of going out there and kind of like putting myself out there and opening myself up to criticism in that way, as long as I'm honoring the horse, which I'm lucky because he does dearly seem to love showing off. So we haven't had any issues in terms of like him not wanting to participate. He seems to really enjoy it, and he's not like concerned or worried about the show environment. But then the other part of me has been that I've been in the last year since not being able to show. I've like really enjoyed the freedom of just going like, I'm just doing this for myself and I'm doing this for the horses. So I'm kind of always torn between those two, like my competitive nature and like my desire to be an advocate for this type of work for the horse kind of is at odds with the like kind of quiet voice within me that goes like, we're just doing this to like, I don't know if you're familiar with the monks who make sand drawings and then sweep it all up at the end.
No.
It's this like really beautiful process, and I'm so bummed I don't know the name of it, but it's these monks that will create these beautiful mandalas on the floors of temples with colored sand. And they're like so intricate, and they spend days and days and days working on this, like just etching tiny, tiny, tiny details into this great, huge mandala. And then at the end of it, they just sweep it all up. because it's about the art, and it's for them, it's about the meditation, and it's about the honor that they're showing. And that is how I feel about horsemanship a lot of the time. Like, I love that I come into the arena and we like offer this gift to each other. We offer this like beautiful connection between the horse and rider, or horse and handler on the ground. And to me, it almost feels like kind of dirty to feel like I should try to like put quantification on that. Like, why would I put that up for judgment when it's beautiful just the way it is? So it's kind of always back and forth on that, but I am signed up for some shows this year.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people, once they discover, you know, a nicer way of being with horses, I guess, they do start to question the purpose of competing. But I really like how you have this mindset change of it being an exhibition, and also, you know, being an advocate for the horse. But I also think there are other ways to do that as well, like you're already doing through Instagram, which is fantastic. Can you tell us what horse-related purchase has most positively impacted your life in the last 12 months?
Oh, I'm a saddle addict. Having saddles that fit my horses like perfectly and fit me perfectly, because I think that that's a huge part of like, if we're going to ride, we should be really kind of like buying a good bra. Like, you should spend extra money and get a really good, comfortable bra. So I actually have I finally got a nice dressage saddle, which I'm really excited about. It's a Doibun Partner, which is actually a company that I work for too. They're Avante Double dressage saddle, which I love. And then it's very fancy and it's so comfortable. I love it. And it's adjustable, so I can adjust it to the horses and continuously get it fitted to my main horses, but I can also kind of use it on other horses and fit it to the horse, because I think it's really, really important to, if we're going to ride a horse, we should have a properly fitted saddle.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so nice when you find one that fits you and the horse, and it's a luxury as well, because usually they're so expensive.
Totally. Yeah, it is. But to me, it's worth it. I'm like, if it fits, it should fit everybody, but it's really hard to fit. It's hard to find a saddle that fits both of you guys correctly. And so I found the saddle and put it on. I was just like, I'm home. It's so nice.
So good. On another note, if you could have dinner with any 3 horse people, dead or alive, who would it be and why? And what would you ask them?
Oh,
all the hard questions.
I think it would be a lot of, I think Nuno Oliveira is one of my number ones that I would absolutely want to just have dinner with him and pick his brains. And I just have a bunch of questions for him about like various different kind of mundane things. Although it'd be kind of hard. I'd have to like learn how to speak. I guess he spoke English, so some of the things about reading older texts in terms of like older horsemanship texts is like the translations to English aren't always very good. So yeah, it's just some like mundane translation questions and like making sure we have it right. But I would just want to talk to him more about like I want to hear about his emotional relationship with the horses, and like if he, you know, how he felt about that sort of thing, and just kind of get more of a personal side, because I think he was somebody who had that deep emotional connection with his horses that allowed like such incredible communication to happen. And I think he was really in touch with like his body physically, and I'm really interested to know if like that translated over emotional. I think I would probably be so nervous that I would be able to ask any of the questions though, because I'm a girl. Let's see. And then who else would I want at that dinner? I recently have kind of gained a lot of respect for Warwick Schiller. And I think I want him at the table too, because he is a really good interviewer and an awesome horseman and
a great storyteller.
A really good storyteller. So he would be really interesting to have at the table too. And I think maybe if I was too nervous to ask the questions, then he would just like casually ask them and like manage to get all this interesting stuff out of Nuno. Let's see. And then I feel like honestly, there's got to be some like secret horsewoman of the past that like none of us have heard of, that has just like done all sorts of magic work with horses and like hasn't even bothered to come out and tell us who she is because she's so tied up with what she's doing. And that's who the third person that I would want to invite, because I feel like there are so many untold stories of incredible horsemen, but also horsewomen, and I feel like specifically horsewomen, because we're like only now just getting our time to shine in the equestrian world and getting really any space to speak. But
yeah, I feel like there must be so many people out there who are incredible with horses, whose horses do have a lot of autonomy, but they don't really put themselves out there. They can't be found. So we don't know about them, which is, I mean, I can see why they do that, but it's also a shame because they would inspire so many other people to follow that pathway. So yeah, I know what you're saying there. Do you have any favorite horse books or resources?
Let's see. Hold on, I've actually got my little pile of books here that I really like.
I mean, I've got a whole bookcase behind me. Well, it's sort of not full, but a lot of Kindle as well. So
actually, one of the ones that I noted down that I wanted to share that I think was really important, and I would recommend to any horse people, is actually the book's by Daniel Goleman, and they're about human relationships, but there's social intelligence, and I think he has one on emotional intelligence too, that I think are kind of revolutionary and should be read by everybody, because I mean, they're all concepts that I think we're all aware of, but it was really cool to have put down in a book and be able to really like see how you and how we can become more aware of our own selves. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of times there's this like draw to like learn more about the horses and learn more about like how we can be better equestrians and all this sort of stuff. And that is of course very important, but something I'm always trying to focus on in myself is like becoming more aware of my own internal self. And of course we all do it for the horse because it's easier to do it for somebody else than it is for yourself. But I think it's a gift to be able to give that to yourself. And then it's also a gift to all the relationships you have in your life, whether they're equine or human.
Yeah, because I think there's so many resources out there to learn about horse training techniques and about the horse itself, like the species and emotions and all of those things. But yeah, unless we can be, I guess, better humans ourselves, none of those techniques are going to work.
It's so true.
So if your horses could talk with words, what do you think they would say to you, and what would you like to say to them?
Oh, I mean, I'd love to think that they would have some like really deep stuff to say, which I'm sure they would, but I think a lot of them would be like, I've been trying to tell you for like the last couple of years that I really want this one specific spot scratched, and you're always going right around it and you're not actually getting the right spot. Because I really love scratches. No, but I do think that each of my horses would have something like deeply profound and beautiful to say, because they all have such incredibly powerful and unique personalities themselves. I would love to ask them more about like their history, because a lot of my horses come to me and I don't know their history. I'm lucky with a few of them that I do, but even the ones where I know part of their history, I don't know all of them. And I would love to just be able to talk to them about that. And I think I would like to be able to, with words, tell them how much they mean to me and how sincerely I mean it when I tell them that I don't ever want to push them past what they're willing to give with me. And I think that is something that I'm striving to do every day with my actions, but to be able to like tell them that with words, that would be really, really wonderful.
That's beautiful. I've also wondered what sort of accent my horses would have if they could talk.
Oh my God.
What kind of personality they would be, like, you know, in a school situation or something. Like, this one's the jock and this one's the popular girl. But anyway, that's how I think sometimes. Before we wrap up, can you tell us what is next for you? Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? And what is your ultimate goal with horses?
Oh, I mean, in 10 years' time, I'd love to pretty much just be doing the same thing I'm doing right now, which is pretty much spending every waking moment thinking about them and working with them. And yeah, that's just like not much more in the world that I could ask for. It's like living the absolute dream. Um, I think my ultimate goal with horses is just to continue the process of refining our communication. And in that, I don't mean like our ability to have them listen to our aids more, but more like deepening the like kinesthetic language that we have together and the emotional language too. Like I had this really beautiful experience with one of my horses recently who were learning some of the higher school movements at Liberty. So we've been learning like school halt and lavad and some tete-a-tete, and it's this really beautiful feeling in hand, and I can feel it so succinctly and clearly in our body movements when we're on the ground. And then translating that under saddle has always been, the under saddle work for me has always been more difficult, but I had this really incredible like goosebumps all over, immediately wanted to cry moment where we were working together, and we're bareback and I have a side pull on, but the reins are loose, and I was able to just like with breath and just contracting small muscles in my body, was like everything just clicked so perfectly, and just was able to like lift into this beautiful school halt, and then this beautiful lavad, and it was just like so. I mean, to me, I was like, that's it, that's the peak. Like I've hit. There's nothing to go further from here. But the amazing thing is that feeling also translates in the most mundane moments of like just the same connection in walk, or like walking alongside, or walking down the road or down the trail. Like there's those same moments. And so it was this really beautiful reminder that we can have these incredible developed communication with them, like between our bodies, between our energies, but that connection can translate to all the moments that we have with them, and that it can always get deeper.
That's so nice. I'm sure our listeners are thinking, yes, I want that for myself. And where can I find out more about Tara? Can you tell us where we can find more about you, and also about your online herd course? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, you can find me online at Unbridled Goddess. I'm on Facebook and unbridledgoddess.com. And on my website, you can click on the herd section and you'll get a little bit more information on that course. I'm like kind of in the process of revamping it right now, and I'm hoping in the next couple months to have some more courses available too. The herd course is primarily about like our interpersonal relationship with ourselves and how we can deepen that in order to deepen our relationship with our horses and become more clear and connected horse people. So you're welcome to check it out, and hopefully stay tuned for some more courses in the future as well.
Nice, sounds awesome. And to finish up, can you tell us what is the one message or takeaway that you would like our listeners to get out of today's conversation?
I think it would just be to go out and enjoy your relationship with your horse for what it is, which is there's this incredible, magnificent being that's willing to share space with you. And we have all this responsibility surrounding it and all these goals and ideas and all that. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to like just looking your horse in the eye and just appreciating who they are, I think that's something that can be easy to forget in this really crazy, really wild, busy world that we have. So I hope you get a chance to take a moment and just appreciate that, because it's so beautiful. And we all have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I guess we get involved in horses because of that. We love them. We think they're amazing, but somewhere along the line, it can be lost. So it's nice to reapproach your horse with that that old way of thinking about your horse in absolute awe and just being grateful to be in their presence.
Yeah,
so
yeah, definitely.
Thank you for leaving us with that message, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. It's been an amazing chat. Super nice.
You're so welcome. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thanks for listening to the Horsemanship Breakthroughs podcast. Make sure you hit subscribe so you get notified every time a new episode is released. And if you've learned even just one small thing from today's show, I would really appreciate if you could leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. If you have any questions from today's show, suggestions for future episodes, or just want to reach out and say hi, I would love to connect with you on Instagram at Amalia_horses. Remember to also register for my free connection and communication mini course at amaliadempsey.com.